Hey guys, it's Boki here today with another fun video for you. I'm going to be showing you how to quilt your projects without a walking foot, so stay tuned. Hey guys, it's Boki here from Gigi's Fabric Shop, home to Juki and Junkies, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to quilt a little project without the walking foot. I know there's sometimes like a love and hate relationship with your walking foot, and I'm one of those people who just finds better results without my walking foot, so I put myself to the test to figure out how I could get beautiful, regulated stitch quality without my walking foot, and I found a way. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's go over the supplies and what I'll be using in this video today so you can repeat the same thing at home. So starting off strong with our first accessory that we're going to be using is the Even Feed Walking Foot Guide. So this is a little guide bar that attaches to the walking foot, so that way you can do those symmetrical quilting, so like little diagonal squares, anything where you want to follow the previous stitch that you did. So we're going to be using this little guy. You want to make sure you have the full setup, so the whole contraption like this and the little black screw that holds it into place. And we're going to go over why that little black screw is very important. If you have the TL18, this already comes with your machine. I'm going to be sewing on the TL18 today, and this tutorial is a little bit specific for the TL18. I haven't tested it on a 2010 because this is what I personally sew with at home. So you could try it at home, but it's going to make sense once we get into this video why the TL18 is really nice to use this contraption without the walking foot. So we'll get into that. I'm going to be doing a little quilt sandwich here today. So if you have like a little mug rug at home, or if you have something tiny at home that you want to practice on, I just had some scraps, some leftover batting, and I just made this little like 14 by 14 inch sandwich. You could turn this into something later, a little pot holder if you wanted to. It could even be smaller just to get the whirl and the hang of what we're doing here today. And then I'm also going to be using some marking tools. I have a couple options here so you can decide which is your favorite. I've recently really started loving the Hera Marker. This is a really cool contraption. It allows you to make creases and indentations on your projects without having to mark them. So that's kind of cool because you don't have to worry about taking out any marks. You just give it a little press afterwards and you're good. So Hera Marker is certainly an option for you. This is available on JukiJunkies.com, as well as all the parts I'm going to be talking about here today. So if you see something that you want to try and test out, head over to JukiJunkies.com to get your parts, or check in the description below. All right. And then another option, if you're somebody who likes to make physical markings, you could do something like a chalk marker, you could do a water erase marker. These little Chacopel, Clover, they're like colored pencils almost. They're like chalk. It's nice because you get so many colors with it. You get a double end, so it's blue and pink. It's yellow. This one's all yellow and this one's all white. And you get a little brush to help you kind of brush out those markings out of it. So these are fabulous, kind of old school, but they're nice because they last a really long time. So that's kind of all we need to get started. I'm going to be working with Glide 40 weight thread on my sewing machine. This is a beautiful 100% polyester thread. 40 weight, a little bit thicker, but it's nice and strong, durable, made right here in the United States, and it's virtually lint-free. So that's my setup. I'm going to be using a quilting needle, 9014. You can use a top stitch needle, you can use a quilting needle, but 9014 is a really great combination for quilting and the Glide 40. So without further ado, let's get started. So here's a little example of a weekend project that I had. This is actually a really funny story. This was supposed to be a giant quilt, and I got really lazy and I didn't want to turn it into a quilt anymore, so I turned it into wall hangings. But I did some fun quilting. I improv the rest of it from here. I really liked how it turned out, little scalloped bottom, or the curved bottom. But I wanted to do just a really nice kind of simple quilt design. So as you can see here, I just did diagonals to do these little squares. And I wanted to have, obviously, my stitch quality to look beautiful because this piecing is a lot of work, and I wanted to make it look great. And sometimes a lot of us think we have to use our walking foot or we have to free motion quilt to do those things, and I'm somebody who sews really fast. So using a traditional walking foot is great, and if you're into that, go for it. But I like to sew really fast, and sometimes I struggle with the walking foot. I get like puckers, or I just have a hard time with it, and it's probably just because I'm a little impatient, and I had to find a different way to get my quilting to look just as good as the walking foot. So that's what the point of this is. The stitch quality honestly turned out so magnificent. I used that quilt guide that I'm going to be showing you how to do these beautiful lines. It helped me follow the previous line, so that way I could stay evenly throughout the whole thing. And honestly, I cannot believe that I quilted this thing. It looks like a long arm did it. I'm going to zoom you in a little bit so you can see the stitch quality on the back. It's a very beautiful. All the stitches are super defined, and then of course my favorite is the top because the stitches just look delicious. I think I was working with the color linen here, and I couldn't be happier with how this turned out. It looks really, really nice. Everything is even, and the stitches all stayed really consistent. That's another thing sometimes I struggle with. I feel like I have a hard time getting the stitches to be like the right size all the time, because again, I think I'm just being really impatient when I'm using my walking foot. So today's hack, so to speak, on quilting without the walking foot, doing any sort of symmetrical lines, you don't have to use this guide bar, but the guide bar is really nice, especially if you want to do any symmetrical quilting. You could do diagonal lines, straight lines, up and down, vertical or horizontal. You can do kind of like a plaid design. I've done that in the past too. That always turns out really pretty. And then when you use this, you kind of eliminate having to use any sort of marking tools all the way through. I have a couple lines that I initially started with just to get the ball rolling, but you don't have to. And the way I'm going to be showing you to do this, you don't even have to use this if you don't want to, but for the sake of the video, I'll show you both purposes. All right, so let's start off with using the guide bar and how you would put this onto the machine without the walking foot. Starting off with attaching our walking foot guide bar, whether you already have this at home or you're going to be purchasing it, this is all that you're going to get. You're going to get 1 piece, 2 piece, and 3. And it's probably going to come all apart, so let me show you how those pieces all attach. First, starting up here, you have this little screw. Once you loosen this screw, that allows you to move this over. So when this is installed, your walking foot actually sits on the back of this when you normally have that kind of setup. But this allows you to create that space, whether you want it 1.5 inches apart, 2 inches, 1 inch, whatever you're looking for, this allows you to set that up. So you can tighten that down right there once you have that in position. There's also this screw right here, so you can do this and also move it this way. Some people maybe want to do it off of the other side, off of the left side or the right side. So that would technically kind of allow you to do that as well. But this one moves over here, so you can adjust it accordingly over here. And then this little screw does also loosen. I've never really played with this one myself, but if you wanted to, you could kind of put this at an angle if you needed to for whatever reason, but I think you could also take this off. So then you could completely take that off and then flip it to the other side. So if you wanted to put this walking foot on this guide bar on the opposite side, on the left side, you could do that. So really adjustable, which is nice because you can really set it to however you need it to be. So I'm just going to put this back in. Tighten that down and make sure it's nice and straight, obviously, because I want to follow my straight lines. So that's what that attachment looks like. And then last but not least, the most important piece is this little black screw. For the longest time, we didn't even have replacements for this, so it was really hard if you lost it. But the black little screw, we do have replacements for now on JukiJunkies.com, so if you need this. But this is what's going to allow you to put this onto the machine. You can't use this big, large presser foot screw because it's not long enough. So I'll show you. I'll take this one off so you can compare the two. You can see and kind of understand. I like getting visuals because I want to get your guys' opinion on something. I've thought about starting a science series on this YouTube channel where I kind of show you visuals of things that we explained, but in depth, like 3D models. Does that make sense? I've thought about doing that. I think that'd be really fun. But you tell me what you think. But this is this screw, and then there's this one. So this one is significantly shorter. It's bigger, so looks something like this. So you have the 2 screws. The black one is going to be much longer than the larger one right here. So, and that is to compensate for this piece because the screw goes through right there. So obviously it can hold it. If you use this one, it's not going to reach. And it has to go through this. So you got to make sure you stay with the black screw whenever you're using the walking foot guide bar. So to attach this little guy, since we're not using the walking foot, we do have a separate video on our YouTube channel about how to attach this when you're using the walking foot, but it's very similar. I'm just using the hinged 1/4 inch foot on my machine right now. That's the standard foot that I like to have on my machine. So when I follow the right side, it gives me an accurate 1/4 inch. So you can use whatever foot you want here. There's no limitations to what you can use this with other than obviously a free motion quilting presser foot. That kind of defeats the purpose, so you wouldn't use that. But to attach it, it's really simple. Simple in the sense that you just gotta kind of align things up. So I'm gonna put the black screw in first. I'm gonna lift my presser foot, and then I'm just gonna make sure that everything is matched up as best as I can. I'm trying not to get into the camera. So once you kind of get it in at first, you can just tighten it, but you just have to make sure things all align. Go. So it might be easier to put this black screw in first, and then pop this guy in, and then tighten it down. So that might be the best way to do this. And then once you kind of finger do it, you can just do it with your T-screw to make sure things are nice and tight. Make sure you're putting your presser foot all the way up because I've seen people install your presser feet where it's 2 down, and that causes presser foot pressure issues. So make sure you are doing that. So now that it's installed, many tightenings later, you want to make sure obviously that screw is nice and tight so this doesn't wiggle around, your presser foot's not going up, not shifting down at all, and then you can adjust this according to whatever you'd like it to do. A couple adjustments that we're going to do before we start. Your presser foot pressure, which is located right up here, it's this little window that's right here. There's a little blue notch. Did you know that this opens? Your little blue notch is right there. You're going to lift it up a little bit, more towards the top, like the last notch, okay, because that's traditional when you're using your walking foot. So we're kind of like acting like we're setting up the machine for using a walking foot, but we're not really. So that's the first adjustment we're going to make. That's really the only adjustment we're going to make, and we're going to do our stitch length to be whatever you'd like it to be, and then I forgot the most important thing, the micro lifter. So let's kind of switch over here so I can show you what I'm going to do my top stitch length at, and then I'm going to show you the micro lifting function. So the reason why in the beginning of this video I said that this was going to be a little bit more specific to the TL18 is because the TL18 has the exclusive micro lifting function. So if you're somebody who has the TL18 Collector's Edition, or if you have the TL18 QVP, you will have the micro lifter, which is located right up here. All the other models will not have the micro lifting function. So I'd love to see you guys try this out on your machines at home and see if that works. But this is a little bit exclusive to that TL18. So this is definitely going to help kind of release the pressure. So what the micro lifter does is this is your presser foot pressure control. This has nothing to do with how much space you have between the foot and the fabric. So think about this. Okay, so this right here, this is your presser foot pressure. This is just how much pressure is being applied. So if this is your fabric and this is your foot, if you put more presser foot pressure, think about somebody adding 2 dumbbells on top of the foot. If you're alleviating the pressure and bringing up the blue dial, you're taking off the dumbbells. So now there's not as much pressure, but nothing has changed as far as the clearance. It's one set clearance. It's just more pressure or less pressure. Hope that makes sense. What the micro lifter does now, when you start unscrewing this, you're going to start to see a couple of notches here. And once you keep going and you hit the red means stop, those are physically lifting the presser foot up off of the needle plate. So watch what happens now. Now that I'm all the way up to red, you can see here that I have room under the foot. And that space is a really small space, but I always tell people it is the difference between getting over a seam and not getting over the seam. So I like to put my micro lifter up depending on how thick my project is, and maybe I'm doing something more pieced or not pieced, something more chunky, just depending. You can work anywhere in between this range, from that top gray line to the red. Sometimes when I do binding, I'll put it on the top one, just to help alleviate some of that pressure. I noticed that my stitch quality comes out a lot nicer. But all the way to the red is going to be really good for this project, for just this little quilt sandwich, because it's going to just help feed it through better without all that extra resistance between the feed dogs and the actual foot. As far as your stitch length goes, this is going to vary depending on what you're looking for in your quilted look. Anywhere between 3 and 4 is going to be a really nice top stitch look for quilting. Anything under a 3 is going to be really tight, and you don't want those stitches to be super tight. You want there to be some definition there. You know, you don't want the stitches to be too big, so obviously they come undone. So I always like to go right in between 3 and 4. That's my pretty place, but if you ever want to figure out what you like the best, do some test stitches and see which top stitch you like the best for your projects. But I wouldn't suggest going past a 4 just because they'll be a little too long and you don't want those stitches to come out. All right, so now to make that first initial line, you don't have to make all the lines unless you prefer. Some people like to do that just to really know that you're being symmetrical. But I like to usually make like the first 1 or 2 lines to make sure that I'm following the spacing that I'd like. So this is where you're going to want to use either your Hera marker or a actual marking tool to physically see it. But you would just start with your lines. And it's really nice because I'm using my 45-degree angle right here to make sure that I'm with the edge of my quilt sandwich or whatever my project is, so to kind of give me that angle that I'm looking for. And I always suggest when you make your first initial quilt, or even if this is a big quilt or a small quilt, to start in the middle. And the reason that is because if you start over here, things are going to shift, right? So it's always important to start somewhere in the middle, so that way if there's any little loosey-goosey ends or air pockets, they're going to kind of get pushed out on the edges versus stumbling into that problem later. So I'm just using my 45 degrees right here to help me, to help me stay nice and straight, so I know I'm making my first line perfectly straight, and I'm gonna use the Hera marker to just indent into this fabric. And honestly, I was a huge skeptic of this thing, but it really is nice. I don't know if you can see that, but it's like just denting into the fabric. It's really, really neat. And then if you don't see it, of course, you can always make that line with an actual marking tool. Whatever is your preference. There's lots of ways to do things in sewing. The second line I'm gonna make is gonna show me my distance that I'd like. So depending on the quilting, I typically like to do 1.5 inches. I feel like that's a really good space, but depending on the look, depending on the size, maybe you wanna go a little bit bigger. A good rule of thumb for quilting is not to do bigger than a fist distance. So this is, I don't know, maybe like 3-4 inches. I wouldn't recommend going bigger than that, but for smaller scale projects, you kind of wanna have the quilting be a little tighter. So I'm gonna do 1.5 as I like, and I'm just gonna go over that line that I did with the Hera marker just to show you, you know, there's multiple ways to doing things. So you can do this, or you can do the Hera marker, however you prefer. This one's a little more visible, but the downside to this is you gotta fluff it out, you know? So just depending on what you'd like to do, you can mark the whole project, or you can just do the first 2, but that's why this little guide is gonna be helpful, because it's gonna sit in the previous spot and help you keep going. So let's go ahead and start stitching this out. Alrighty, so I'm gonna start with my first little Hera marker line, and that's gonna help me do the next line. So we're just gonna get started. I like to do a little back tack stitch before I start. Oops. Oh, see? Okay, this is a perfect learning moment, okay? So for me, all the way up at red was a little too high for this project because it's not super thick, so I'm gonna put my micro lifter just a hair down. So that way I have, you see how it wasn't showing at the beginning? This is why it's nice to go through these things, you know, because sometimes video tutorials show you it perfectly and then you're like, what if I did it wrong? So we're just gonna stitch over that line that I did. And as you can see here, I'm getting no problem whatsoever with my stitching. I'm not getting any puckering. Everything's going through really nicely. I can make adjustments to my micro lifter as I go if I am experiencing any puckering. But for me, this is great. Also very important when you're quilting, it's really nice to make sure that you're not like tugging on this. If you are doing a bigger quilt, make sure that something is supporting, it's not hanging off of the desk and dragging, causing drag. Those are all things that'll affect your overall look here. It might look like I'm putting a lot of pressure on this project, but I'm really not. I'm just like lightly touching this as the machine does all the work for me. I'm just guiding it to stay right where I need it to. Doing a little back tack stitch, and then let's check out our stitch quality here, and literally could not be more beautiful. Look at that. That is gorgeous. So no walking foot here. And now what I can do is I can switch this project over, so then that way this guide can be adjusted with the screw right here to sit right on top of the stitch that I did previously. Tighten that down. So now as I'm sewing, it's gonna follow along to make sure that I'm staying nice and symmetrical the whole way through. So let's do the next row of stitching. I'm just gonna pop that thread under there, move it here, adjust that if needed, do a little back tack stitch as we start, and then just make sure that guide is working with you, not against you. It's sitting in that last previous row that you did, making sure everything is nice and flat. Little back tack stitch there. So now we can check what we just did, and the stitches look beautiful. Just be mindful that when you use, you know, like markers and things like that, it's going to, you know, leave that little residue there. But the stitches themselves look absolutely gorgeous, super defined, and I had no fussy issues with this. So I'm gonna keep going, sewing this out so you can see just how beautiful this end result's gonna be. All right, so that first direction turned out really, really easy. Everything's looking really nice. So now to, you know, do that kind of square design that we're looking for, I just rotated it so that way I can do the other lines. And really, I'm gonna keep doing the same thing here. I'm actually using a 3.5 by 18.5 inch Creative Grids ruler. We have the 3.5 by 12.5 on the website, which is also a very nice ruler, but this one's nice because it's just a little longer. So I'm sure we can offer this one soon. If you don't know, we're actually working on revamping Juki Junkies. So depending on when you're watching this video, you might be in the future or maybe watching this right now, but Juki Junkies is gonna get a huge makeover, which I'm so excited about. So just using those 45 degrees again to help me stay nice and straight to draw that first symmetrical line. I used my Hera marker to make that first line. Again, preference here, but I'm just gonna keep doing my 1.5 so that way I have beautiful 1.5 inch grid quilted design on my project. Alrighty, so same thing here. We're just gonna get started, starting on that first little Hera line marker that we did. Nothing's really changed here, same stitch length, same everything. We're just gonna quilt this side, very light-handed. Also, I wanted to mention that you could totally use a laser light like the Sew Q Laser here to do symmetrical quilting, much like I am with this little guy. So that's another great thing that you could use. A little advice that I would like to give as well, if you are using this, especially if you're doing it on a bigger scaled project, make sure to stop and make sure that the guide isn't moving on you. Naturally, with the vibrations of this machine, it's very possible that this could unscrew and start to wiggle around and move out of place, or you knock it out of place. So make sure you just are paying attention with those bigger projects that this actually is still giving you the stitch length that you want, the spacing in between your stitches. So I'm gonna stitch my first line here. And then for some more information on how to use that Sew Q Laser, we do have a really great video on how to use a Sew Q Laser. I show you a bunch of different ways. Refer to that video. We'll link it down in the description for you so you can see how that would help in a scenario like this, okay? So I'm just gonna keep doing what I did on the other side. I'm just following that last stitch that I just did and gonna get some beautiful quilted results here. Alrighty, and just like that, we have a beautiful little quilted project without the walking foot. So I hope this video just kind of sparked some creativity into another way to quilt, right? So there's a lot of ways to do things in sewing. Some are right, some are wrong, but some have room for interpretation. So this is certainly another way to do it. I would love to see someone's results with a 2010, but a really crucial thing on this particular project is the micro lifting function, as I explained earlier. So as you can see here, our little 1.5 inch squares turned out great. The stitch quality looks really nice. Those stitches look nice and regulated. Sometimes I struggle with that exact issue. So this looks so nice. And I'm like, I was telling Kylie, I was like, what can I turn this into? What can we turn this into? It's a cute little pot holder or something. It's just really fun. So this is another way to take your quilting projects and take out the fuss, take out the thinking. If you struggle with a walking foot like me, this is another way you could do it. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and I hope you apply this to your next quilting project. Feel free to drop down below if you try this on your 2010, if it worked, if it didn't work, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything else you want me to show you guys. But I hope you enjoyed, as this was a really fun discovery for me to do because now I'm like ready to quilt anything. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to our channel as we are constantly posting videos every Sunday for you guys. So new stuff to learn, and if you're subscribed, you'll get little notifications, but if you don't, then you'll miss out, and that's no fun. So we'll see you again soon, and thanks for watching. Bye.